Much for coming. We realize that it is a heavy news day with Parliament in session, so the fact that we've gathered so many journalists in this room is just fabulous. Um, as you know, the theme really today and the reason why we're doing this workshop is to see whether women in our country can access abortion services. So on the 28th of July, it's going to be exactly a year since the Supreme Court judgment on the case of this 10-year-old young rape survivor from Chandigarh, which all of you know about. We read about it. Many of you wrote about it. The media did a fabulous job of covering it. The media did a fabulous job of getting the human face really out of the story. We want to focus today in the workshop on the policy, the laws, why these cases end up being in court. Do they need to go to court? What is the MTP Act all about? So these are some of the issues that we want to talk about today and hopefully give the journalists here in this room a deeper understanding. And that's why we've got experts who've traveled from different parts of the country, Dr. Nozer Sheriar, Mr. Vinod Manning, Anjali Nair from Global Health Strategies, which has organized this meeting. Abantika here from the Indian Express is going to present the media's point of view because she's written on abortion. The Quint is a partner in this workshop. Thank you very much for that. They've always tried to link this issue with women's rights, and that's why we thought it was a natural sort of collaboration to go with the Quint. So without much delay, I will request Anjali to come on board and just set the context for this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandita, and thank you, everyone. Really, really honored to do this. I'm just going to give you 6 slides, and these slides are based on posters and media coverage to give you the context. I definitely cannot do what Nozer and Vinod can do to explain the details, but I'm just going to set the stage for this meeting. So can we go on to the slides?
Next.
So I started my public health career in 1999, and at that point of time, the world had just emerged from the International Conference on Population and Development, where we looked at population with sustainable, with rights, and the whole word, the words reproductive health, reproductive rights had just been coined. India sadly was moving in the opposite direction, and we had a lot of our political leaders talking about population control. There should be disincentives. Andhra Pradesh had actually started giving gold chains to women who got permanent sterilization. And so we put together a small group of media persons, political leaders, technical experts, and went right up to Prime Minister Vajpayee. And I remember him asking me, he says, forget everything that you've told me for the last 10 minutes. If my health minister says, why should I not have disincentives, what are you going to say? And it took me 30 seconds to respond to say, you're not going to achieve what you're trying to do, because women want to limit their family size, and data says so. And that's when we got the Reproductive and Child Health Program, we got the Population Commission, disincentives were out of it, and we were all celebrating. Today, when I go back, and this is what we spoke about, at the international conference, these were the points I made, and finally it was just a 30-second response that got it. But it really says that reproductive health in the context of primary health care should include family planning, counseling, information, education for prenatal, safe delivery, postnatal, breastfeeding, prevention and appropriate treatment of infertility, abortion. And in circumstances where abortion is not against the law, such abortion should be safe. We're still fighting for it. We're still fighting for the comprehensive services. Yes, maternal mortality has come down, but not because of unsafe abortion. We don't talk about reproductive tract infections. We don't talk about other reproductive health needs of older women. We're basically trying to prevent maternal mortality and make childbirth safe, but we're not really doing much about unsafe abortions. So these are the progressive laws in other countries, and I won't go into details, but essentially you can see there's no limit, no limit, no limit. And today, in 1971, when India came up with the MTP Act, it was progressive. But because of technological advances, because of changes, today there are amendments that have been suggested to the MTP Act, and Nozer and Vinod will go into it, to make it address the need of the hour. Around the world, when you look at it, there were anti-abortion posters and they sparked an outcry in Rome. This was in Ireland, where the ministers came out and said, let people vote on the issue of abortion. We are not going to put up abortion posters, anti-abortion posters that really look at murdering the baby or are insensitive to needs of the women. The Argentinian lower house passes legal abortion bill in tight vote, and the reason was because women were out on the streets. They were out on the streets demanding for rights. And these are the kind of posters that have been out in the country. When Justice Kavanaugh was announced by Trump, the entire news media in the US was talking about Roe versus Wade, where Kavanaugh was one of the judges, and would that mean a reversal of that judgment? And that was a big debate in the country. This is India. We had right to privacy last year, which was a fabulous judgment. We were completely taken aback by the progressive statements and how right to privacy includes the right to decide when, how many, and if at all, any children. And that is a woman's decision, and there cannot be any pressure. And then we have this ad, which was by Sony Television. It was in Times of India, front page, and very cleverly Sony Television positioned it with Amitabh Bachchan starting Kaun Banega Crorepati. So the eyeballs went straight towards it, and it said, mother asked to kill her own child. This was basically a program that Sony was doing, and it was going to discuss abortion. They discussed several social issues. Pratigya, the campaign, then met Sony Television. They wrote, but the damage was done. And then we have a Supreme Court judgment. Here was a young woman who was 20 years old. She was going through an abusive marriage. She had moved to her parents' house twice. She came back, and the abuse and the dowry demands didn't stop. But in the meantime, she was pregnant. It took some time for her to muster the courage. And she went and asked for abortion from the court because she'd crossed the 20-week limit, to say, and citing the right to privacy. And while the website says the plea has been denied, the petition has been denied, the conversations in the court were, Justice Joseph said Sarita would regret killing the baby. If she reconciles the husband, you should make the mother hear her child's heartbeat, and also several other things. The media reported it very well, but there hasn't been a discussion and a debate that what does that mean? Why right to privacy, and then why this? And it's the same court. And I love this poster. 77% of anti-abortion leaders are men. 100% of them will never be pregnant. And we need to do something. Sensitive men and all of us together, we need to make sure that women have the right over their bodies. We recently had a meeting in Amsterdam, and we called it Our Bodies, Our Right, and this was on the sidelines of the HIV movement, to say that sexual and reproductive health and rights are in name only. Yes, contraception is available, but it's available because you want to control the numbers. What about the others? Thank you very much.
So without any delay, I'm going to request Dr. Nozer Sheriar, who is the former Secretary General of FOXY, which is the Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecological Societies of India, to please present his point of view. Yes. If you feel comfortable here, otherwise you can go and sit there.
I can be there.
Yes.
colleagues, good afternoon. It's such a privilege to be here in our capital city with the media that can speak to the country and to see a hall full of media persons. I'd like to share with you something that influenced me greatly many, many years ago. I don't remember when I read this story. This was a picture in Time Life, somewhere in the 1970s, that has stayed with me. This was a woman who had come to a hospital in Chile with the complications of an illegal abortion. I mean, that picture with the empathy in the doctor and the suffering the woman really gets to you. That's what we really need to see a lot in media. She told her doctor, and I think if I remember correctly, that this had been her 26th abortion. What makes a woman risk herself 26 times? So I thought that this is where I feel the story touched you, the visual was eloquent, and I think this is the power of media. If lots and lots of people saw things like this, they would really be able to understand where the woman is situated and where she comes from. Of course, that was Chile, where abortions were illegal, where contraception was not available a long time ago. In fact, Chile has now passed a law which allows limited abortion. And we live in a country where abortion has been legal since 1971. Why then did a colleague of mine in March 2018 have a woman come in with an ultrasound which showed something in a uterine cavity? And this is what he found in the uterus. The city of Mumbai in 2018, this shouldn't be happening. Not when we've had legal abortions for so long, and not when there are such safe methods of performing an abortion. Obviously, this woman was from one of the slums of Mumbai where all the facilities hadn't really reached her. So let's look at why women need safe abortions, because I consider unsafe abortions as being the pregnancies at the highest risk. In obstetrics, we have high-risk pregnancy, and I believe the pregnancies with the highest risk are the ones with the unsafe abortions. Well, firstly, again, media articles not so long ago, 2015. Times of India telling us that unsafe abortions in Mumbai were still claiming lives. And what they stressed was that in the city of Mumbai, you still had a dearth of qualified doctors available to these women to perform abortions. We may be all there in Mumbai, but we are not there everywhere that women need us. So when you look at why women risk an unsafe abortion, they do this because sometimes they believe that risk is their only choice. They have no other choice. And they may believe that there is a denial or a limitation to accessing services. This may be because of restricted laws, but sometimes very few facilities or lack of access to qualified providers. I'll come to that later. This is still true of our country, where a majority perceives abortions as being illegal even today. I always say that legal abortions is one of our most closely guarded secrets. The only real public campaign I remember is when I was a young person traveling by the suburban trains of Mumbai. Pearl Center, a private abortion clinic, used to advertise abortions at 70 rupees. And people knew that abortions were legal only because Pearl Center advertised and nobody else spoke about them. Poor quality of services. This is sad because the public sector is supposed to provide abortions everywhere. They are empowered to by the law. Cost, whenever you have problems like abortions where women perceive that this might not be legal, there's going to be exploitation, and that's the bitter truth. And then finally, and most disturbingly, the gender roles and norms, the stigma related to abortion. How ashamed that woman feels when she's really doing nothing wrong, the opposition and the lack of autonomy she has. So the task I was given today is to kind of do a presentation on demystifying the MTP Act, which I think is really one of our very progressive legislations by Parliament way back in 1971. and that was supposed to enable the environment for a safe abortion. Well, first let's get one thing very, very clear. Abortion is common. I checked world meters this morning, and since the start of this year, the world has seen 78.8 million births. It has already seen 23.5 million abortions. So after childbirth, the next commonest thing in a woman's life is an abortion. It is estimated that every third woman will have an abortion at some time in her life, and that means that about 1/7 of the world's population is going to have an abortion at some times in their life. And it's really confusing for me to understand, then why is there so much opposition and why are there all these problems? A Guttmacher study estimated the worldwide incidence of abortions at about 56 million and said about 20 million of them might be unsafe, most of them in the developing world. But there was a study published in the Lancet in January 2018. I thought this study would make such a big noise in our country. And there was a few articles referring to the study and then deathly silence. This told us, and this was a very comprehensive scientific study, never been done before, by an organization which has the experience of doing this throughout the world, the Guttmacher Institute. And they did a very detailed study in 5 representative states, and then they projected the figures for the country. 15.6 million abortions, 28 million births happen in India each year. They said that almost half of the 48 million pregnancies were unintended, and about 2/3 of them landed up with an abortion. We need to accept these figures because only then can we serve those women and give facilities for those women. They said health facility-based abortions were 22, with 73% outside health facilities. Abortion has changed. Medical abortion has taken abortions out of health facilities. Even the Indian law now allows a doctor to prescribe medical abortions without having to be sitting in a health facility. And that's such a great opportunity to give those 15.6 million safety when it comes to getting their abortions. Of course, they projected that about 5% still had those dangerous techniques like the one we found in Mumbai, and that public health facilities, which should have been doing so much more, were providing about 5% of abortions. So first, let's quickly look at the MTP Act as we inherited. And the MTP Act functions on the background of the Indian Penal Code. In this country, it's illegal to do an abortion, period. The MTP Act creates an exception to the Indian Penal Code for a provider. So the MTP Act protects me as a doctor if I function under the Act from what the Indian Penal Code is trying to say in section 312, 313 to 316, which is all very fine. I just want to place one thing before you. For the first time in human history, large numbers of women are procuring abortions themselves. The culprit was always someone else who was doing it to women. Unless we do something urgently, and unless we move to at least decriminalize abortions for women, I believe this is putting women at grave risk when someone with an agenda decides to start using this against women who may have gone for a medical abortion themselves. And then there were lots and lots of deaths. I remember every hospital in our country had a ward called the septic ward, and the septic ward was only full of women with septic abortions. You go back 30 years, 40 years and speak to doctors and they'll tell you there was no hospital in India which didn't have a septic ward. I know that the hospital I studied in had one, and then of course, thankfully, we didn't have septic abortions anymore and it became the neonatal intensive care unit. But at that point in time, there was the Shantilal Shah committee with civil society and doctors working together, and the bill went to the Rajya Sabha and finally was passed as an MTP Act in 1971. But every story has a hero, a colorful person, an interesting person. And for me, it was this person I learnt about when I went into the history of abortions. Read about him. In fact, The Hindu wrote a fabulous article on him last year. Demographer, economist, sociologist. I mean, these are the kind of people we need leading such important ministries. Was the Minister of Health and Family Welfare, and way back then, he promoted abortion and sterilization. Of course, he also did crazy stuff like promoting abstinence for 1 year after marriage and saying that, and trust me, this is available reliably, that Indians should start eating beef so that they'll become healthier and stronger. Can you imagine what would have happened to this minister? Anyway, this is what he actually, it's there in writing. And if you really Google him, you're going to find out all these things online. So the MTP Act is an act that is provided for terminating those certain pregnancies by a medical practitioner, okay? So it's for the protection of practitioners. Incidentally, it was also beneficial for women. There are the acts, there are the rules, and there are the regulations. And it's important to understand this because this needs to be amended by Parliament. This is framed by the central government, and I always believe that we don't use this enough. There's so much good they can do by writing rules without having to go through the parliamentary process. And then finally, there are regulations which may be framed by state governments. And here, unfortunately, state governments have sometimes exceeded their brief and done things with regulations which they were never supposed to. So first, let's just look at what the Act basically says. When may pregnancies be terminated? Well, we've got two groups, one below 12 weeks and the other between 12 and 20 weeks. And at the moment, the 12 and 20 weeks needs the opinion of not less than 2 medical practitioners. And this has continued right from the beginning, and I've often wondered why they would have done this. Late abortions, at one time, even when I was a student, were medically risky and dangerous. That's not true anymore. Medical abortions are now safe, not just early, but even late. And this became a barrier to a number of facilities, particularly in the public sector, where you don't have 2 practitioners. So women can't get that second opinion. Induced abortion after 20 weeks is not permissible under the MTP Act. And this is where we run afoul with the law courts, who said, this is what the Act and the law says, go and change it if you want to. In fact, I wonder, how can people go after 20 weeks when this is so specifically written? But then maybe we don't take advantage of the law enough, because there is an exception to save maternal life as per Section 5. And when I last checked, a pregnancy in a 10-year-old girl was definitely a grave risk to her life. A pregnancy in a young adolescent, by any medical judgment, is going to be much higher in terms of risk than a woman who is an older woman. So I'm wondering whether a practitioner can make this decision under the existing law, which gives him the complete right to make an exception of the gestational age when in such cases, particularly the 10s and the 12s and the 13-year-olds, and maybe step forward and do what they're supposed to do, care for these women. Nikita Mehta case, everyone knows very well. And here let me say something, and that is that this went to court, and the court said 24 weeks. They sent it to a committee, though there was never anything in the law that says you send it to a committee. And the committee said no. Committees of doctors aren't a good place to ask these things to, because we doctors don't give up. And I don't think at some point the committee of doctors can decide how much medical science can do, because there is a certain right of the woman to decide whether something has to be done for a pregnancy or not. This is the incidence of late abortion in many countries of the world. In developed countries, they have reported that women needed an abortion. And remember, these are countries where there's universal antenatal screening. They pick up their birth defects really early. And they still needed a late abortion in anything from 0.2 to 0.6% of their total abortions. India, I'm estimating, let's say it's 1%. Many of our patients come late in pregnancy. They will have a serious birth defect diagnosed at 28 weeks. 26 weeks, which is not compatible with life, this would come to about 100 or 150,000. How many cases went to Supreme Court? Anuba, 21? 21 went to Supreme Court. And we feel good when the court says there are tens of thousands of women who need this, whom we looked after. And I can say here that the medical profession looked after these women from 1971 till almost close to now. These pregnancies were terminated because this was a medical decision for a medical purpose, for a medical abnormality. I don't believe this came under the MTP Act, because technically if you go by the MTP Act, it even goes against an elective cesarean, because that's terminating a pregnancy at 30 weeks when the woman's life is not at risk, because it doesn't talk about abortions. And we did this, and I'm proud to say when I am in a group of doctors and I ask them, have you all terminated a major birth defect? And they will all say, yes, we have. We've always done that. Unfortunately now, because a few cases went to court, a lot of doctors believe they can't do it anymore, and women are being denied and told, I'm sorry, you'll have to wait till term and deliver this grossly abnormal fetus, which is never going to survive. So we need to do something about this urgently. When can they be terminated? Well, basically the MTP Act is really simple. It just says two things. It says risk to life or risk of grave injury to physical or mental health, and substantial risk of physical or mental abnormalities if the child were born. When Anjali showed us the UK law, which we basically took almost like a cut-paste job, they'd put this at any time in pregnancy. For some reason, we didn't put it as any time in pregnancy. I think the big difference is risk versus actual existence and diagnosis. A risk is a woman who's exposed to German measles and might have an abnormal pregnancy. Having a baby with a major heart defect which won't let it survive, or whose skull is missing and the brain is exposed, definitely doesn't classify as risk. It is an existing abnormality not compatible with life. But we've had a lot of flexibility in judging the necessity and indication, and I'm proud to say that to date, most women in India who've gone to doctors have had abortions when they wanted to. And the great thing in India is, we did a study once, conscientious objection for us is not a big deal. An obstetrician does abortions because it's a part of looking after women. These were the two explanations that were given just to say how you fit into those things. So rape came under grave injury to mental health. For me, an unmarried girl being pregnant would come under this, because she risks grave injury to mental health with an unwanted pregnancy. So people tell me, oh, unmarried girls aren't allowed to terminate a pregnancy under Indian law. That's not true. It's only this silly explanation 2 which said married women, which you can't give as an excuse for an unmarried girl, failure of contraception. But you can definitely say that she has grave risk of injury to her mental health, which is absolutely true if she went ahead with a pregnancy. Consent, well, obviously for our law, and that's something again that we need to be proud of, an adult woman over 18 requires nobody else's consent. And the amazing thing about this consent form is there is no witness's signature. This is the only consent form I found in medicine without a witness's signature. That's the kind of confidentiality they gave this woman way back in 1971. But for a minor or a mentally ill person, it has to be with the consent of a guardian. Though I must tell you what we did last time, we just diluted the meaning of consent. Well, this was again a very famous case. Maybe we can ask Anuba about it. And this was a patient where the High Court said that it was in the interest of a mentally retarded girl to undergo an MTP. But then a judgment in the Supreme Court disallowed the MTP. And here I think it's very important for us to do amendments right. Because when we did the amendment, and I'll come to the amendments that happened in 2002, I don't know why we dropped mental retardation from that. We should have kept it there. And finally, this is extremely important, and this is for providers, that if they do an MTP under the Act with all the precautions, they are completely protected from any civil or criminal legal case. So this is what we had. It was a good act, but we had a few deficiencies. So then in 2002, there were 3 amendments. The first is the original act had the word lunatic, which was very defined because there's an Indian Lunacy Act. So we dropped lunatic and we made it a mentally ill person. Unfortunately, and this is something that had been told to me by a past Chief Justice of India, you don't think enough when you do your amendments and you write your laws and your acts. Because we said mentally ill person means a person who's in need of treatment by reason of any mental disorder other than mental retardation, which is where we went wrong in the case from Punjab. We didn't have the differentiation of who can give consent and who can't give consent. A mentally ill person under treatment can give consent, and there are certain patients who are mentally retarded who may not be able to give consent. Then the next great thing that happened was you devolved all powers from the level of the state capital to the district. I think that was an advance. At that time, people were waiting for 7 and 8 years to get their permissions to be registered. And finally, we really simplified the registrations, and we have first trimester terminations and second trimester terminations being separated out. So technically, you need minimal requirements, and there should have been first trimester MTP clinics all over the country, because you need just a gynecological examination table. Before that, they needed an operation theater, they needed anesthesia equipment. Do you really need to use them in the first trimester? So that was a big change, and that happened. There was a meeting in 2001, IPAS and PSI and a number of organizations came together, and this resulted from that. And who may perform this termination? Well, as of now, obviously it can only be an MBBS doctor, anyone who's a postgraduate OBGYN, but an MBBS doctor has to perform or assist 25 abortions to be certified. Completely out of date, because the MBBS doctor may never perform a surgical abortion. He only needs to do medical abortions. And I think these are things which can be changed in the rules as soon as possible. And this was something that we had to put in, because when medical abortions came in 2002, people said women will come to the center and take the pill and they will wait in the center till they abort, because the MTP Act says she can only do it in a clinic. So very cleverly we said that this may be prescribed by the medical practitioner. They just have to have access to a place and they can do it in their clinics wherever they are. This disengaged. So when I told you about the Lancet study, those 70 to 73% of abortions happening outside clinics are these abortions which don't need to go to clinics anymore, the medical abortions. And for the first time, punishment came into the Act. The original MTP Act had no punishments. The punishment went to the Indian Penal Code. But now you said that if the person was not qualified or the place was not certified and the owner of the place was also liable as also the administrative, there were punishments. So this was the MTP Act that changed in 2002-2003, which we are functioning under at the moment. But this was not enough for what women need and what women needed, because it was still a very medicalized thing, completely medical profession. And so we worked on the MTP Act between 2006 and 2010. There was a committee with diverse representation. I think there were 35 or 40 people on the committee, different organizations, different backgrounds. I mean, it was the most exhilarating work that the committee did. This was a proposal. It never really came into the Act, but the first proposal was to change the preamble and talk about access to safe services, putting a little more responsibility on government and authorities. It's no longer just about terminating certain pregnancies, but also about access. One other proposal that we had, which of course became irrelevant, because while the committee finished its work, the Parliament changed the age of consent from 16, which was at that time, to 18. So we had actually thought that maybe you should bring down the age of consent for MTPs to 16, because women could give consent for sex till 16. But unfortunately that has changed, and we need to really do something about that as well. And finally, we had proposed that a person who is incapable of giving consent, a person with mental illness and mental retardation can give consent. They are not all incapable of giving consent, and this is a judgment the doctor has to make. The next change was, and this was the controversial one which ran into a lot of difficulty, change registered medical practitioner to healthcare providers, and it was proposed that the Ayush doctors and the nurses also come on board. There's enough international experience to show that mid-level providers can be a big, big part of giving safe abortions to women. In fact, there is a WHO guidance from about 3 years ago which also gives all its research put together, saying that doctors of alternative systems and nurses can also be there and support the provision of abortions. And remember the number I told you in the beginning, 15.6 million abortions. We do not have enough postgraduate doctors and MBBS doctors to deliver 15.6 million abortions. We need all hands on deck. And some of them were providing it, but obviously that was illegal, and we need to really look at what can we do to increase our provider base. The next thing was amendments to increase access, and it was proposed that for the first trimester up to 12 weeks, the woman shouldn't have to give a justification. She should just walk in and ask for an abortion. And that's what the amendment proposed. It's there in the proposed amendments. The second continued up to 12 to 20 weeks, but they kept a third group of 20 to 24 weeks. Unfortunately, when the amendments were put up, they did not write explanations, so they were misunderstood. They were waiting for this to come in the MTP rules, which would have followed the amendments. Being a part of the committee, I can tell you this was totally justified, and this came from the National Commission for Women, because they said that a woman who's been raped, or a woman who's unmarried, or a woman who, she may be an unmarried woman, she may be a widow, she needs that extra help of 1 month more. 24 weeks would help a number of women, like the case that was just mentioned at 21 and 22 weeks, access this kind of a service even for 1 month. Why not later than that? Well, there we have a medical problem. After 24 or 25 weeks, that fetus, and we do medical, is likely to survive. And that puts you in a totally different range, because if you have a child which is born alive, then what do you do, and who takes responsibility for it, and does it go into the neonatal intensive care? So 24 is where at the moment viability, non-viability is defined. The next is very simple: replace married woman by woman and her partner. And this was where this was actually never the part of the amendments before, but when the Nikita Mehta case went to court, we were forced to quickly go and write an amendment, because we thought that those women were being looked after. And there is now an amendment which is proposed that the length of pregnancy shall not apply when the termination is necessitated by the diagnosis of substantial fetal abnormalities. And for God's sake, no committees. This would be defined by the government in a gazette from time to time, which obviously people would have to comply with. And these are terminations which can happen, as happened in the past and continue to happen today, for medical justification and reasons, and come with great responsibility. They don't come easily, because these are wanted pregnancies which have no chance of surviving or will require very major medical intervention to survive. Right, so this is something I believe when it comes to late abortions, everyone has an opinion when it's actually those women who are really. Finally, I'd just like to touch upon two things. And one is, this was an actual member of our federation who had performed an MTP on a 17-year-old girl. Well, this was 2014. This doctor wasn't really aware of the POXO Act, didn't report it to the police. Parents went to the police, came to know, and then the police came to arrest the doctor. The doctor went underground, and finally the High Court let her off and said that no, she wasn't really to blame. We have a problem. And the problem is that while the POXO Act is necessary, important, we have suddenly criminalized all sex between the ages of 16 and 18. And let's face it, 16 to 18-year-olds have not started having sex recently. I have been now looking after women for the last 30 years, and right in the beginning when I was a resident doctor, we would have 15 years, 17 years, 18 years coming in pregnant. We have a background in this country where 45% of our women are married before the age of 18, and the Supreme Court said that even they come under the POXO Act. So I think we really need to now do a rethink. We need to keep going back to our acts and see what works and what doesn't. Define them, be a little more sensitive, create, kind of cutoffs. I do understand that I wouldn't want to take a 15 or a 14-year-old girl as being able to give consent. But we need to be a little careful about these things. And I think that that's one major discussion that our country needs to now start having, because we are creating young people are not coming to doctors anymore, because the doctor has to inform the authorities if they come to us for any kind of care related to a pregnancy. When they come for contraception, there may be plausible denial. I may say, oh, I didn't know she was going to have sex, but when she comes to me pregnant, I know she's had sex and I have to pick up the phone, or I have a right to write a letter. And you know what happens with the system in our country, where it may not always be the best possible thing for this woman. The next thing was this conflation with the PCPNDT Act, where somewhere authorities decided that if they restricted all abortions, then the problem of sex-selected abortions would go away. Now, sometimes this is so irrational. This was a member of a federation practicing in Maharashtra who had a patient with incomplete abortion coming. At that time, he did not have an MTP Act registration, so he was not doing MTPs, and he was actually arrested and imprisoned. Fortunately for us, we had worked with the ministry on this particular document, which very clearly said that it was difficult for us because Maharashtra government was hell-bent on putting it as an MTP, that an incomplete abortion, a natural abortion or a spontaneous abortion does not come under the MTP Act. And the moment we sent him this, it solved this problem. But why did this happen? Because the authorities were hell-bent on restricting abortions to restrict sex-selected abortions, without understanding that a first trimester abortion cannot be sex-selected. And what the Guttmacher paper tells us is when 85% or more of the abortions in our country are first trimester, we are maybe targeting the wrong group of people and women and abortions and creating problems for everyone to restrict what is a problem which we need to deal with of a much smaller number. And I think this is again something we need to start questioning and challenging now. Look at the PCPNDT Act, see where it's worked, see why it's not working, and definitely do not allow it to interfere with the right to abortion. In fact, when we wrote the Code of Conduct for the PCPNDT Act, we actually said that the authorities cannot conflate it with the MTP Act. So finally, I'd like to end here by saying that, you know, as I said before, if a woman can't have an abortion with dignity, she is going to have that abortion any which way. She will find a way of doing it. In fact, she is doing a favor to us as a country, because when we last looked at our data, maternal deaths because of abortion seem to be coming down. Not because of something we are doing right, but because medication abortion that women may have accessed themselves has been much safer than what women did in the past. Having a stick in your vagina or your uterus, having paste supplied, having all kind of concoctions given to you. And I think we need to change that. I think we need to give them sensitive care. I think we need to give them affordable access wherever they are. And we need to recognize that there's such a large number of them out there that they need to be looked after. You know, with childbirth, 27 million, there's so much attention. I say that you've got SDGs, you've got everyone kind of wanting to do things for them. What about these 15.6 million who also need the same care but have stigma, secrecy, condemnation? When they go to sites, the providers are judgmental, and well, actually these women need to be welcomed with open arms. So we'll take the questions later. Thank you. It's really been a privilege talking to you all about the MTP Act.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sheriar. Before you move on, I just want to, before I welcome Mr. Manning, if there are any quick questions related to the presentation that Dr. Sheriar has done, feel free to ask right now. Of course, we'll do a more elaborate Q&A later, but if there are any questions, please shoot away. Okay, none yet. Thank you. So there is. If I can just request the journalists to introduce themselves. I know you, Menika, but just for the sake of others.
So you said that we should do away with these committees, right? I mean, if possible? I mean, what are the options, one? And secondly, it seems like all gynecs seem to have different opinions. The one in JJ will be different, one in KM will be different, one in PGIMR will be different. So, I mean, what are the options in law to deal with this lack of objectivity, I suppose? I mean, what can we do?
Well, firstly, there is nothing in any law that requires a committee. Okay, it's something that was proposed by a court to kind of create an expert opinion. The MTP Act, if you can see, allows the practitioner, as of now we call them a registered medical practitioner, to make his opinion in good faith. You can trust your doctors with just about everything in the world, to make decisions of life and death for cancers and cesareans. Why is it when it comes to something as basic as a medical termination of pregnancy that there is a different standard? Where suddenly the woman is not capable enough to make her decision, where her provider who looks after her in good faith cannot decide and cannot give his opinion. And I personally believe that you're very right in saying there's going to be so much lack of objectivity, so much subjectivity. Two different doctors will have completely different opinions. And look at the people who come there. Let's take Nikita Mehta's case. Okay, she had a child with a major heart block. The child would have not survived unless that child had a pacemaker implanted at birth, which would have to be changed from time to time. It was her decision to say, I don't want my child to go through this. But you think a cardiologist is going to say that? He says, I'll put pacemakers every 3 years for this child as long as the child lives. And a hospital, a private hospital in Bombay, had the cheek of saying, we will sponsor it for that one child. But that's not what she wanted. Now that was an honest, ethical decision which should have happened between her and her doctor. That is an induction of labor. And as we know, she finally had a natural spontaneous abortion, as many of these patients often do. So basically, what we are facing here is you have created a structure which doesn't need to exist, which sometimes is arbitrary, which has different people coming on the committee, and look at the time wasted in getting a committee to meet, in getting a committee to agree, in getting a committee to decide. So what we had proposed and what was there in the amendment, and interestingly, we actually had a meeting where we brought in experts from other fields. We were a part of the meeting. Vinoj was there, right, Vinoj? And we had the ministry there, and we had a very senior pediatric surgeon from Mumbai and a pediatric cardiologist and a geneticist, and we came up with a list of conditions which the government said we will gazette later, because they mentioned in the amendments that if that condition is there, the doctor needs to document it, but he doesn't have to go asking people for permission. I believe that's how it should be. Yes, we do understand that there's a concern about misuse. You think the guys misusing out there are waiting for the act to be amended? They're doing it anyway. And that's a different problem. Acts and laws are written for the good people who want to be protected and do things right, and not for the crooks who go and do stuff outside the act and the law any which way. So I think that's a concern which is misplaced. I can confidently say that leave the first trimester out. The government authorities go from hospital to hospital looking through every register in the operation theatre, first trimester terminations, which will never be sex selected. In the second trimester, leave these pregnancies out, which are definitely defective. There is documentation, there is reports, there are ultrasound pictures, there are opinions. These are wanted pregnancies. There is grief when this woman has to terminate her pregnancy. And deal with the problem where it's meant to be dealt with, as was proposed in the PCPNDT Act with the prenatal diagnosis, and not go unfairly and target women who are coming in late. Unmarried women are being denied second trimester abortions because doctors say, you know what, we just don't want to do late abortions anymore. Patients are coming in time with major birth defects who have said, we don't want to justify this to anyone, please go to a public healthcare facility. And even they are denying these patients and turning them away. So I think we need to have balance. We need to sit down, think about this, discuss it, and now come to a kind of a consensus as to what will work, what won't work, and how we can stop these poor women having to go knocking at the courts, at the doors of the courts, and just a handful of them do, And like I told you, I think there must be 80 or 100,000, 80,000 or 100,000 women out there who need it, out of which 21 reached the Supreme Court. We feel so good about it. But those women out there are either getting it, which I'm glad, or are suffering because they are not, which is so sad.
Any other question?
I'm Abuntika Ghosh from the Indian Express. I wanted to ask you, I can understand that doctors are reluctant to do abortions because of the legal hassles involved and all that. But among my friends, I have seen doctors trying to counsel people out of abortions, not for legal reasons, but because of something like that, listen to the heartbeat kind of logic. So I don't know how to frame this question, but what I really want to know is how much of the denial of abortion services is because doctors, after all, are also a part of our society and they have the same kinds of beliefs, value systems, whatever you may call it.
Yeah, so that's really a great question. And well, doctors are human, and doctors will sometimes project their morals and their beliefs. According to me, is unacceptable because it's not about the doctors. In 45, it was a very scientific study with population council on medication abortion. And we found that a number of them were doing abortions routinely. Some of them were doing it conditionally, but well over 90 or 95% of respondents said they did abortions. In complete contrast to a similar study done in the US, where it's 15% of doctors who are now abortion providers. So that's the great news, that a doctor in our country who's an obstetrician just does abortion. He doesn't give too much thought to it. I have seen, again, with people I know, what you just described. That's unfortunate, because you are projecting your beliefs onto someone else. Some of them are judgmental. They would not have a problem with doing the abortion, but they suddenly become very judgmental when an unmarried person comes to them or a young person comes to them, or they think that you've come out 6 months after marriage, you shouldn't be having an abortion, and they'll do everything to try and talk this woman out of it. Oh, you know, you are 37 years old, you should not have an abortion because you'll have a problem in future. And well, that's something we really need to keep working on. I think I would like to reverse engineer it by making women did it with medical abortions. Medical abortions took off in India not because doctors wanted to take it off, but because women took it upon themselves to get medical abortions. For the medical profession, a surgical abortion is always more convenient and more lucrative than a medical abortion. But women didn't wait for doctors to decide that. They said, we'll go and do it ourselves. And today, that's why India is doing about 12 million medical abortions out of the 15.6 million abortions. Hats off to women. I think this, again, has to come from women. And I didn't say this, but when these things happened, when we had the amendments, I didn't hear the voices of the women's groups. Why the silence? Why is it as a provider issue? Where we look to being people with a bias because we want to provide abortions, where are those women on the streets, like happens for the most ridiculous things in our country, where they bring a state to a standstill because you can't have a sport, which according to you is tradition? Why are we not bringing everything to a standstill and saying, we have 15.6 million women. The world is 56 million abortions. I tell every patient of mine who has an abortion, you know what, if every woman who does an abortion does it with great seriousness. I hate it when people say women do abortion casually. There's not a single woman who ever does an abortion casually. It's a tough decision. It breaks her heart. Very often she goes through humiliation to get that abortion. So don't tell a woman that she's doing it lightly. So I tell every woman that if 56 million women are doing it each year, it cannot be immoral or wrong. You should not feel bad about it. You've done it after a lot of thought. Another picture I like to give is, if you take the women who've had an abortion in the last 10 years, 56 million women, that's 560 million women. That's the next most populous country after China and India. Why aren't women getting what they want when there is so many of them undergoing an abortion? There is a bit of a problem because a lot of women will have an abortion themselves, but still have a problem with abortion as something that they didn't feel comfortable with. But I think this is where we need to move next. We need to reach out to and have women come forward and start saying, you know what, this is what we want. This is what we are going to get. You better give it to us because it's our entitlement. You're not doing us a favor by giving us a safe abortion.
Thank you so much. We are going to open the floor again for Q&A, so let's just hold off till then. And I'd like to invite Mr. Vinod Manning, the Executive Director of the IPAS Development Foundation, who's going to talk about the systemic challenges in accessing abortion services in India.
Good afternoon once again. I'll start with a confession. This is the first time I'm meeting so many media people together. And it's slightly intimidating. And when we were preparing the slides, Ritu and I said, every time we have talked to a journalist, we have been said, where is the data for what you're saying? So we removed out from this slide anything that we couldn't substantiate without data. The brief was to share with you what we think are probably the socio-economic and other systemic issues which prove to be a barrier for safe abortions in the country. Very quickly, this is data Dr. Sheriar presented. Same study, big study, landmark study. For the first time, we have it. 15.6 million, a large part, only about 22% go to a facility which has provided the safest abortion. But to be very clear, the 73%, how do I use the pointer? This one? Yeah. This is out of facility. It includes what we, medical abortion taken by women at home. But we need to be very cognizant of the fact this is not unsafe method. There's not enough evidence to know how safe it is, how unsafe it is here. But even WHO is now, because of medical abortion being safe, it's such a safe technology, no longer have a division of just safe abortion, unsafe abortion. They have it as safe, less safe, and unsafe abortion. So when we interpret this data, we need to be very cautious. This study talks about the source of abortion, but not the safety of abortion. A large part of this probably is safe. And when Dr. Sheriar said, why is unsafe abortion contribution to maternal deaths reduced over the period of time, we would like to take credit for it, but probably it's about women accessing medical abortion at home, which is the largest contributor. We work in the public sector, we work in about 10 states. So long back, one of the government officials said, why is it that public sector, why are not women coming to the public sector? So what's happening to those women? So we had done a study in Madhya Pradesh with about 380 women to find out the pathways of unsafe abortion. These were women who came into facilities after having an unsafe abortion. So it's not about that 15 million, but it's a subset of them. What did we discover? Most of these women decided to terminate the pregnancy around 6 to 8 weeks. That's when they decided that the pregnancy was not wanted. And these are unsafe abortions. So what happened? 53% of them decided to do the abortion at home. And the other 41 probably went to an unsafe provider. Then, having not completed the abortion, these people, because there would have been one large set which would have completed the abortion and all fine, they went back to another provider. Some of them went back to another provider, and before they came to a hospital for completion of the treatment. A decision that was taken at 6 to 8 weeks, for some of the women, ended up after around 18 to 22 weeks, after repeated visits to providers, continuous bleeding, and trauma. But what happens, this is regarding, in the same community, we found out what is the pathways in which women seek abortion when it is spontaneous, it is not induced. 70% of them came directly to the facility. Why is that so? Why is there such a marked difference? Primarily, three broad issues. There is huge issue of access, which again Dr. Sheriar had talked about, the whole stigma, which you talked about, and costs. Let's kind of disaggregate this to mean, what does this mean? In 2009, and I don't think much has changed over the period, it was estimated there's only one trained legal MTP provider for a population of 2 lakhs. These numbers just don't make sense. That's why we do not have no provider, no facility. So where do women go, even if there are other factors conducive for making them go? Even where there is a facility, there's 22% of the women. The sad part is, and this is public sector data, 8% of, and this is about 163,000 women who were studied, 8% DNC, which is an outdated technology. WHO classifies it as an unsafe technology, is still being used. And medical abortion in public sector still, in the private sector, I think it would be 60, 70, 80% of women in early abortion would be using offered medical abortion. So the point I'm trying to make is, one, we don't have doctors. Where there are, and therefore facilities, and where there are facilities also, unfortunately, access is not world standard, not high standard. There's much more to go. Then comes the big piece, stigma. There were various studies over a period right from 2012 to 2017 that were done. Primarily, this is around Bihar, Jharkhand, MP, in these 3 states, where 70% women, rural women, think abortion is illegal. How much, but would this number be drastically different in urban India? We doubt it. Very often when we interview people coming in for work, there's a large percentage who still think, postgraduates who think abortion is illegal in the country. And when it comes to knowledge of till when, the 20-week gestation, 98% of these rural women did not know that they could avail an abortion up to 20 weeks. And low awareness is an aid to stigma, it increases stigma. We did again in another study to try and find out abortion perspectives of women, rural women. 58% of the women we surveyed had some kind of stigma associated to abortion. What did they believe? They believed that it is guilty, they would feel guilty if they had an abortion. And these are not abortion seekers, but general public, general women. They consider it a sin, and they considered it against the religion. And this is not too dated, it's about 2012 data. So when there is so much stigma, what happens is a woman who wants to access abortion is not in a position to be able to access information. She cannot consult, she cannot discuss on ways, methods of seeking abortion very openly. It has to be done through, surreptitiously, which again circles back to the, access, information not being there. Finally, the third issue, cost. What is the profile of a woman seeking abortion in the public sector? Now, 57% of the women seeking abortion in the private sector are extremely poor. Very young women, below 25 years is 38, and the per capita income of these women is 1,500. What I would like to do is loop you back to the first slide. No, I didn't mention that. Loop you back to the information Dr. Sheriar shared. The Lancet study estimated only 5% of the total abortions were provided in the public sector. These are the women who require abortion. Only 5% of these poor women get abortion in a public facility. So where do they need to go? If they have to go, they are forced either to do it at a suboptimal method or alternatively spend far more than what they can afford, because that 1,500 is the per capita monthly income of these women. Another small data, the distance traveled. What has been the average distance a rural woman has to travel? If she has to go to a public facility, it's about 26 kilometers, 20 kilometers in a private facility, and informal is 7 kilometers. Primarily, the distance to a provider also dictates, among other reasons, where she can go, where she can afford to go for abortion services. And because informal providers are right next to the community, that's probably the distances drive these women there. So there are huge barriers. 15.6 million women wanting abortion. A very small percentage of them have the ability to access abortion at a facility. There are various barriers which we talked about, but I would like to close with one barrier which probably all of you could help address. Various of these slides got presented earlier. It's all in the top. One is when you report, the imagery around the reporting. We get all these images which further stigmatize abortion and provide a wrong kind of image of early abortion. And secondly, it's the messaging around it. Can we be positive about it and not have such threatening messages around it? So what I would leave you with is, as journalists, if you could address this, work on this, advocate with your colleagues to be careful about imagery and messaging when reporting on abortions, you would help a long way in reducing at least one of the big barriers that women have for safe abortion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Manning. Now, before we open it up, for the Q&A and the panel, we'd just like to take 10 minutes to invite somebody who's come from the Family Planning Association of India, Dr. Suchitra Wadhwa. She's a medical officer with the Family Planning Association. She's come with a few link workers who can talk about, real issues which they face at the grassroots and the challenges that women face. I know we're all discussing policy, but really, unless the real stories come out, what are we actually talking about? So welcome, Dr. Wadhwa. Please come on the panel.
We also have a counselor with her. Asha is our counselor. I'm Dr. Suchitra Wadhwa. I'm from Family Planning Association of India. And this is Sonam Devi and Usha Devi. These are our frontline workers. These are the people who basically bring clients to us from the community. And since I'm talking to them, then I'll switch back to Hindi. So सोनम, उषा, बताइए कि आप जब कम्युनिटी में से आपके पास औरतें कैसे आती है जिनको गर्भ समापन करना हो या गर्भपात करना हो, कैसे आती है?
उनको हमारे पास वो आती है, अगर उनको गर्भपात कराना होता है तो हमारे पास आती है, वो बोलती है तो हम उनको
क्या बोलती
है कि हमें अबॉर्शन कराना है, तो हम उनको सलाह देते हैं कि हमारे एफआई में अबॉर्शन होता है, अगर आप अबॉर्शन कराना चाहती हैं तो आप करा सकती हैं, अगर आप दोनों राजीमंदी है तो दोनों करा सकती हैं।
दोनों राजीमंदी
है तो करा सकती हैं। अगर कुछ दिक्कत है पैसे की भी कुछ के, तो मैम से हम पैसे से कुछ कम करा के उनका अबॉर्शन करा देते हैं।
मतलब किसी का आदमी अगर राज़ी नहीं होगा तो उसका सफाई नहीं होगा?
क्यों नहीं होगा?
तो फिर अभी आपने कहा कि राज़ी होना चाहिए, दोनों राजीमंदी होना चाहिए, मतलब क्या?
नहीं, तो ऐसे भी नहीं है कि नहीं दो अब आदमी राज़ी नहीं होता फिर भी उनको कराना पड़ता है, तो आदमी से तो करके अपना वो करा लेती हैं अबॉर्शन।
मतलब आदमी को झूठ बोलती है, बताती नहीं, अपने करा लेती है।
नहीं, आदमी से तो बता दी, बाकी उतना नहीं बताती हैं। जब अगर उनको गर्भपात इतना कराना होता है तो अगर आदमी राज़ी नहीं होता तो फिर भी वो कराती हैं कानून, क्योंकि उनको लेट कर रखा है।
मतलब कर रहा है।
नहीं, आदमी से तो लेती है रजामंदी, बाकी कभी कभी आदमी आगे भी चलते हैं पीछे भी चलते हैं, ठीक है, फिर भी वो आदमी से रजामंदी लेके ही कराती हैं।
एक चीज़ पूछना चाहूँगी, ज़्यादातर जैसे मैं भी काफ़ी महिलाओं से जुड़ी बात करती हूँ, तो अक्सर अबॉर्शन के बाद महिला जाकर के अपने पति को बताती है कि उसने अबॉर्शन करा लिया है, जिसके बाद काफ़ी झगड़े हुए हैं।
हाँ, ऐसे होता है काफ़ी, जैसे अबॉर्शन करा के आ जाती हैं, अपने पति से बोलती हैं, तो वो लड़ाई तो होता ही है।
तो
बाकी
पति आपको भी बोलता है तुम लेके गई थी मेरी औरत को, आप पे भी कोई बातें आती है, आपके साथ भी लड़ाई झगड़ा होता है, आपके
जी,
घर में
तो
भी आके पूछते कि तुम क्यों लेके गई मेरी औरत को, ऐसे बोलते हैं?
हाँ, ऐसे बोलते हैं।
तो आप क्या करते हो फिर?
अब कहते हैं कि भाई हम अपनी मर्जी से तो ले गए नहीं हैं, आपकी वाइफ अगर बोली हैं, आप बोले हैं तभी तो आपकी वाइफ हमारे पास आई हैं, तो ले जाकर अबॉर्शन कराए हैं तभी तो हुआ है। फिर उसके बाद से
के पास आती हैं, वो ज़्यादातर क्या वजह होती है कि उनके पास ऑलरेडी 2 बच्चे हैं, 3 बच्चे हैं और बच्चे नहीं चाहते हैं, या फिर कोई
उनके पास ये वजह होता है कि उनके पास 2 बच्चे ऑलरेडी है, तीसरा नहीं चाहती हैं, तो उनको अबॉर्शन कराना होता है।
तो क्या वो हॉस्पिटल जाती है, पहले डॉक्टर से बात करती है बारे में?
हाँ, डॉक्टर से हम खुद लेके जाते हैं, डॉक्टर के पास उनके ले जाकर अबॉर्शन कराते हैं।
See, for them the first contact will be this community leader. So all their problems, whether they are getting water in their juggies or there's no light, no electricity, or the whatever local problems, they go to them first. So abortion is also an issue. She'll go and first talk to her कि I have this problem, what should I do, where should I go, and then these people further bring them and bring them back to us. Sonam, आप बताओ।
क्या कई बार ऐसा भी होता है कि लड़की होती तो और उसके बाद फिर पता चल जाता है डायग्नोस कराने के बाद कि बेटी फिर से है, तो उसका भी अबॉर्शन होता है।
सबको मेरा नमस्ते और मेरा नाम सोनम है। मैं आर के पुरम अम्बेडकर बस्ती में रहती हूँ और मैं लेडीज़ों के बीच में काम करती हूँ सोशल वर्क का, और मैं फैमिली प्लानिंग से 15 साल पहले जुड़ी हुई हूँ। और डॉक्टर सुचित्रा जी से, दीदी से मेरी जान पहचान बहुत अच्छी है, और हम क्लस्टर में रहते हैं, जुगी क्लस्टर में। तो वहाँ के खास करके लेडीज़ मतलब अनपढ़ होती, जिनको कुछ पता नहीं होता। तो मैं महिला मंडल के बीच में भी काम करती हूँ, महिलाओं के बीच में। तो वहाँ पे मुझे महिला ना अच्छी तरह जानती है और मेरे पे विश्वास करती हैं कि वो दीदी के पास जाएंगे तो हमारा काम सही हो जाएगा। कई बार तो सास ससुर ज़्यादा बाधा डालते कि नहीं एक और बेटा चाहिए, एक है तो एक से काम नहीं चलेगा, एक और बच्चे कर लो। मगर आजकल कुछ लेडीज़ भी और लड़कियां भी बहुत ज़्यादा समझदार हो गई है, तो वो 2 बच्चे से ज़्यादा करना नहीं चाहती, तो हमारे पास आती हैं। तो अगर दीदी के लायक केस होता है, फैमिली प्लानिंग हम लेके जाते हैं, उनको सलाह देते हैं, फैमिली प्लानिंग लेके जाते हैं। अगर दीदी के लायक केस होता है तो दीदी कर भी मतलब सब कुछ फ्री कर भी देती है। अगर कोई वैसे बहुत ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा गरीब लोग मिलते हैं वहाँ पे, तो दीदी अपनी तरफ से उनकी हेल्प करने के लिए हमेशा तैयार रहती है हर तरह से।
इनका क्वेश्चन था कि अगर कोई पता करता है किसी की 2 बेटियां हैं, तीसरी बार बच्चा रह गया, तो वो कहती मुझे अब बच्चा नहीं चाहिए, तो तुम उनसे पूछते हो कि अल्ट्रासाउंड करके देखा है कि नहीं ये लड़की है कि लड़का है कि क्या है, क्यों करना चाहिए ये गर्भ समाप्त, क्यों पूछते
नहीं, आजकल तो बेटा बेटी एक समान हो गया, बहुत लोग हर लोग समझदार हो चुके हैं, इसलिए इसमें कोई भेदभाव नहीं है। नहीं, हम पब्लिक के बीच में जाके भी हम समझाते हैं।
नहीं, आपके पास औरतें आती है बताती है कि मैंने अल्ट्रासाउंड किया
नहीं,
है,
नहीं,
उसमें
नहीं।
देखा है कि लड़की है और आपकी मुझे लड़की नहीं चाहिए।
नहीं मैम, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है। बहुत लोग
Suchitra, 2 questions I'll ask you. Are most of these medication abortions or surgical abortions? And secondly, are they mainly first trimester abortions or second trimester abortions? So, to answer your question, I'll answer on her behalf. This is stigmatization. She has 2 girls. There's no way she will know the gender of the 3rd child when she's having a first trimester abortion. But society has stigmatized her and decided that she must have detected because she's coming in for an abortion. Every woman who comes in for an abortion the second time will have a boy or will have a girl. when the authorities want to access gender records of the aborters, which is the most horrible thing to do, any abortion, however honestly will be done, will have a 50-50 boy-girl outcome. Yes. So we have to stop this stigmatization and looking at what she has and what she is doing, because it's irrelevant in these cases. Yes. Secondly, if there are medication abortions, I just had an educated woman who came to me last month and said, my husband will never understand, doctor. And I said, that's fine, he doesn't need to know. The MTP Act allows you to do it. And she's worried that what happens if he finds out afterwards. I said, great. There's no way anyone can tell an induced abortion from a spontaneous abortion. And you've got to educate these women and say, if you pop a pill and you then have a miscarriage, it's a natural abortion. It doesn't matter how it is started. They do not have to be made liable to, they do not have to be guilty about what they did. That's harm reduction in the rest of the world. And that's what 85% of abortions are about. And of the remaining 15% of second trimester abortions, there is no doubt that only 10% or 12% may be sex selected. And even all those women are being stigmatized just because they've got someone at home, which may be a boy or a girl, and she decides to have a termination because she says, I can't have this child now. She's automatically assumed to have done a sex selected abortion. And this has to stop. This is the prime example. Someone asking a woman, do you have 2 girls? Why do you want an abortion? Exactly. But you're only doing first trimester abortion. That's a meaningless question.
Yeah, but people always say, what do you have back home? 2 लड़कियां हैं तो abortion क्या मतलब sex selection? That is a mental thing they have. And first trimester really it's not possible. But in the community, they have such a close-knit cluster, and if she's going, somebody talking to her, she's going to ask the next day, why are you talking to her? Where did she take you? What was the facility? Why did you go? She'll invariably, it all spreads, so she had an abortion. So she must have had a sex selection. Why? Because she has 2 daughters at home. Even if it was just 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So that is how the, people think. But these people with our various programs, we have been telling them, and they just bring clients to us. But now they are also very aware, and they say, नहीं भाई, 3 महीना हो गया या 3.5 महीने का हो गया, तुम सरकारी में ले जाएंगे. ले जाते हैं सरकारी में, फिर वहाँ क्या होता है?
सरकारी वाले तो बहुत डांटते फटकारते हैं. लास्ट में उसे मजबूरी में बच्चा करना पड़ता है, क्योंकि वो सरकारी वाले रिस्क नहीं लेते, क्योंकि वहाँ भी 2 बच्चे से ज़्यादा अलाउड नहीं है.
अलाउड क्या नहीं है? सफाई करना अलाउड नहीं है, वो लोग करते नहीं हैं, क्या करते हैं?
नहीं, वो गुस्सा करते हैं, कह रहे किसने पूछा था, हमारे से पूछ के किया था.
और
तो नहीं कर देते हैं, तो वो डर के मारे जल्दी से जाते नहीं है.
तो उसको करना ही पड़ता है. वो प्राइवेट में जाके नहीं करती सफाई,
नहीं, उनके पास पैसे नहीं होते,
तो ज़बरदस्ती वो बच्चा करना ही पड़ता है उसको. उसके बाद क्या होता है फिर?
उनके बाद फिर 2 लड़की होती, तीसरी भी लड़की हो जाती, सर पे बोझ बन के बैठ जाते हैं. उनका कोई इलाज नहीं है, फिर मजबूरी में झेलना पड़ता है.
दिस इज़ अ रियलिटी. एंड अनमैरिड आती हैं क्या बस्ती में? छोटी लड़कियां 16 साल, 17 साल, 18 साल में होता है क्या?
हमारे पास अभी ऐसा केस कोई नहीं आया.
आपके बस्ती में नहीं आया? उषा आपके आया है, फिर क्या किया?
फिर उसको अब उसकी माँ थी, उसकी माँ उसके साथ दिया, राजामंदी थी. फिर मैंने उसको लिया कर अबॉर्शन कराया था. उसने अबॉर्शन कराया. शादीशुदा नहीं थी, कोठी में काम करती थी. अब उसे कह दी कि मुझे चाहिए नहीं, जब तक वो लड़का राज़ी नहीं होगा तो मुझे बच्चा चाहिए नहीं. तो उसके माँ ने राज़ी हुआ. फिर उसके माँ ने बोला, तो उसको ले जाकर हमने अबॉर्शन कराया था. हमारे पास हर महीने 2-3 केसें आते रहती हैं अबॉर्शन के लिए. अगर एफआई में जाना चाहती हैं तो कम पैसा अगर इधर होता है, उनके पास नहीं होता, तो मैं एफआई में ले कराती हूँ. अगर प्राइवेट जाना चाहती हूँ तो प्राइवेट करवा देती हूँ. अगर जो सफदरजंग जाना चाहती है, 4 बातें उनके सुननी पड़ती है. सफदरजंग में तो बहुत गालियाँ देती है, बहुत फटकारती है. फिर भी वहाँ धक्के खाते रहती है. अगर नहीं होता है तो फिर वही एफआई में 1-2 महीने का होता तो कराती हूँ ना, तो प्राइवेट में या तो पैदा करना पड़ता है.
देने के लिए पैसा होता है? प्राइवेट में होता है, पैसा दे देते हैं लोग?
हाँ, दे देते हैं, उतना उनके पास होता है, क्योंकि वो तो कोठी में काम करती है ना. जो कि झोपड़ी में रहती है, कोठी में काम करती है. और जिनके पास पैसा नहीं होता वो तो पैदा करती हैं.
और नेक्स्ट आई वुड आस्क आशा कि आपके पास ऐसे लोग आते हैं जो बार बार अबॉर्शन करवाते हैं, तो आपको उसमें कुछ लगता है इसमें प्रॉब्लम है कि 2 महीने पहले इसने कराया था अबॉर्शन, आज अब ये फिर आ गई?
हाँ यस मैम, बार बार आते हैं, बहुत सारे क्लाइंट्स होते हैं जो बार बार आते हैं, बट उनका रीज़न होता है कि हमने कॉन्ट्रासेप्शन यूज़ किया, फेल हो गया, या फिर हस्बैंड तैयार नहीं है करने के लिए। बहुत सारे केसेस होते हैं। लाइक कॉन्डम का एग्जांपल, मैं उसको बोलती हूँ कि कॉन्डम, तो बोलते पति तैयार नहीं है, बट उसको फिर हम काउंसल करते हैं कि बहुत सारे कॉन्ट्रासेप्शन ऐसे हैं जो आप यूज़ कर सकते हैं जिसमें हस्बैंड की रजामंदी की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है, बट वो इतना डरे हैं। बट काउंसल के बाद रिजल्ट आता है कि ओसी पिल आप ले लो, कॉपर्टी लगा लो। कॉपर्टी से रिलेटेड होता है कि हमारे हस्बैंड को पता चल जाएगा, वो मारेगा पीटेगा, या हमने पहले लगवाई थी कहीं से, ब्लीडिंग हुई, या फिर हस्बैंड बोलते हैं कि मुझे चुभती है, या बहुत सारी कंप्लेंट्स, बहुत सारे इश्यूज। बट आफ्टर काउंसलिंग वो कुछ ना कुछ कॉन्ट्रासेप्शन अपना लेती है, जैसे ओसी पिल्स लेती हैं, या फिर उनको बताते हैं कि आप कॉपर्टी लगाते हो, कोई प्रॉब्लम होती है तो आप आके चेक कराइए। बट बहुत सारे मिथ्स उनके दिमाग में होते हैं कि कॉपर्टी ऊपर चढ़ जाती है और बाद में पेट काट के पूरा बच्चेदारी निकालना पड़ता है, ये बहुत सारे डर्स होते हैं उनके अंदर। बट उनको एग्जाम्पल देके मुझे बहुत समझाना पड़ता है। लाइक उनको मैं बहुत छोटे छोटे एग्जाम्पल देके समझाती हूँ, जैसे कि आप शुरू में कान नाक छेद करवाते हो, तब आपको अनईजी लगता है। ऐसे ही कॉपर्टी एक छोटा सा है इंस्ट्रूमेंट, उसका थ्रेड बड़ा होता है, बट आप जगह लगा लेंगे तो आप अपनी सुनी बातों पर मत जाइए। अगर आपको कोई ब्लीडिंग होती है, आपको अनईजी लगता है, आप हमारे पास आइए, डॉक्टर चेक करेंगे, और 1-2 दिन लगेगा, फिर आप यूज्ड टू हो जाएंगे, आपको कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होती। इन केस अगर होती है तो आप उसको निकाल भी सकते हैं।
अच्छा, अगर मैं बीच में टोकना चाहूँगी, एक महिला अगर बार बार आती है आपके पास अबॉर्शन करने के लिए, तो क्या आप सोचते हो उसके पास कोई अत्याचार हो रहा है, कोई वायलेंस हो रहा है उसके साथ में कि
यस मैम, बिल्कुल। मैं उससे बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस भी करती हूँ कि ऐसा तो नहीं है। पहले तो उसकी हिस्ट्री हम लोग लेते हैं कि कितने बच्चे हैं, मेल है फीमेल है। कई बार ये भी होता है कि मैम बेटियां हैं, सास चाहती कि एक बेटा हो जाए, या हस्बैंड चाहते कि बेटा हो जाए, तो बार बार वो हमारे यहाँ तो ये नहीं बोलते कि हमने चेक किया है लड़का या लड़की है, बट उसके पीछे तक जाने की कोशिश करते हैं, बट एक्सेप्ट कोई नहीं करते हैं। बट अगर जैसे मैंने पहले भी बताया था कि फर्स्ट सेमेस्टर में हमारे पास कोई आ रहा है अबॉर्शन के लिए, तो बेसिकली कई बार होता है कि उसको फोर्स किया जाता है कि आप बेटा पैदा करो। ऐस मैम पैसा नहीं होता है, बट जो घर में औरतें काम करती हैं, हस्बैंड काम करते हैं, जो उनकी जमा पूंजी होती है, बट जब उनके ऊपर बहुत सारा अत्याचार होता है तो वो अल्ट्रासाउंड करा लेते हैं जाकर।
आप कह रही थी सोनम कि कई औरतें ऐसी हैं जो कोई कॉन्ट्रासेप्शन यूज़ कराना चाहती ही नहीं है और डायरेक्ट अबॉर्शन कर लेती, कहती हमारे पास टाइम नहीं है, कौन जाए डॉक्टर के पास, ये झंझट करे, प्रेगनेंसी हो गई ठीक है, पैसे दे दो और अबॉर्शन कराओ। ऐसे लोग भी आते हैं आपके पास? आप कुछ बोल रहे थे मेरे को।
मैं बोलूँ इसमें? हाँ, ऐसे आते हैं जो महिलाएं घर में काम करती हैं, वो कहती है कि हमें कल मुझे काम पर जाना है, तो मैं ज़्यादा झंझट में नहीं पड़ना चाहती, आप मुझे ऐसा कर दीजिए ताकि मैं दोबारा काम कर लूँ। अगर मेरा काम छूट जाएगा तो मुझे दोबारा काम नहीं मिलेगा, और जिससे मेरे बच्चे सफ़र करेंगे और मेरे घर में भी लड़ाई झगड़े बढ़ेंगे।
कोई लोग कुछ ऐसे बोलते हैं कि हमको दवाई नहीं खाना, गोली नहीं खाना, गोली से हमको बहुत ब्लीडिंग होता है,
yes,
तो हमें औजार लगा के सफाई करा दो।
मैम, बिल्कुल आते हैं ये केस, तो मैं दोनों फेस करती हूँ, मैरिड भी और अनमैरिड भी। अनमैरिड का ये होता है कि हमारे घर में पता चलेगा कि ब्लीडिंग हो रही है, क्या हो रहा है, एक्सेस तो नहीं चाहते, आप सर्जिकल कर दीजिए जिससे ब्लीडिंग नहीं होगी, और मैं तैयार हूँ। और औरतों को जो घर में काम करती है, जो लेबर आती है, वो कहती है कि मैं रोज़ रोज़ छुट्टी नहीं ले सकती, तो आप सर्जिकल कर देंगे तो शायद मेरे को ब्लीडिंग वगैरह की दिक्कत का सामना नहीं करना पड़ेगा, और पिल्स खाने के बाद मैं आफ्टर 15 दिन बाद आऊँ, मुझे फिर छुट्टी लेनी पड़ेगी, तो मैं बेरोज़गार होने का खतरा है।
आई थिंक एनी क्वेश्चंस?
सरकारी में क्या प्रॉब्लम है? आप कह रहे थे ना जैसे वो
सरकारी में मैम कई बार ऐसा होता है ना, मैं बस्ती में रहती हूँ ना, तो कुछ लोग, कुछ फैमिली ऐसी है ना जिनके कोई सपोर्ट नहीं होता, मतलब मियाँ बीवी अकेले रहते हैं, तो कई बार वो बच्चा पैदा करने हॉस्पिटल जाना पड़ता है ना, तो उनको नॉलेज नहीं होता है, तो एम्बुलेंस भी मैं फ़ोन करके बुलाती हूँ अपनी तरफ से, फिर एम्बुलेंस के साथ मैं जाकर छोड़ के आती हूँ हॉस्पिटल, मुझे रुकना पड़ता है, तो वहाँ पर ना लापरवाही बहुत ज़्यादा है, सुनते ही नहीं है वो, कई कई घंटे।
उससे भी ना आपका ब्लड टेस्ट
for an MTP, whether it is medical or surgical. तो वो रोज ऊपर नीचे आके धक्के खाएगी only to get an abortion done. So instead of that, she said, I'll give some more money, I'll go to a private practitioner and get it done, or I'll go to some other NGO and get it done. At least on the same day I get the services. So, आपको क्या लगता है जब कोई भी औरत अपना गर्भ समापन करके जाती तो क्या वो खुश होती है या उसको लगता है कि मैंने बुरा किया है मेरे साथ? उसे क्या लगता है? मतलब आपको लगता है कभी तो आके आके आपसे लिपट के रो रही होगी या कुछ बोला उसने कि ये क्या किया मैंने, उसको क्या लगता है कि ये मैंने गलत किया, या उसको दुख होता है कि मैंने और एक बच्चा मेरा खराब कर दिया? क्या होता है ओवरऑल बैकग्राउंड, क्या होता है?
हर औरत की ना अलग अलग सोच होती है। जिसके 2 बच्चे चाहिए तो वो, जिसको बच्चे नहीं चाहिए वो तो खुश हो जाती है, और जिनको कहते हैं और लड़का चाहिए, एक और लड़का करना, तो वो तो बेचारी परेशान रहती है।
अच्छा, मतलब किसी को दुख होता है, किसी को दुख बिल्कुल नहीं होता। मतलब वो कहती है सफाई कर लिया तो ठीक है, छुट्टी।
मुझे 2 ही बच्चे चाहिए।
अच्छा, मतलब उसे कोई ऐसा लगता नहीं है कि अरे मेरा एक बच्चा था, गर्भ में बच्चा था, मैंने गर्भ समापन कर लिया, मुझे दुख हो रहा है, ऐसा कोई दुख नहीं होता उसको, वो खुश होती है। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू सो मच। आप आ सकती हैं। I'm just going to request our experts to come on the panel now, and we'll open it for question answers with the journalists. So Mr. Manning, Dr. Sheriar, Anubha Rastogi, who I know has been patiently listening in but hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Someone who is going to explain to us the legal aspects to this entire issue and debate. Abantika, please. And Vaishali, come. Yeah, I know. So one of you can go there, or we can all just shift one, whatever's comfortable. So before we open it up, I just want to start with one question, and that's to Dr. Sheriar. Dr. Sheriar, do you think any of these cases need to go to court at all? Or do you think this is a decision that's to be made between a woman and her doctor? Why are we fighting for the amendments to the MTP Act?
Can I say something about those women before I talk about the courts?
Sure.
I think that was the most amazing session. It was an eye-opener. We had myths. We had a very clear sharing of how the system treats women. We have a lot of work to be done. I mean, even with women who are looking after other women. And I think interactions like this are extremely important because they suddenly give a face. We know how women, but Safdarjung is a very busy hospital. And for that doctor there who's overworked, this is lowest priority, which is why we need lots of other providers who aren't busy doctors, highly qualified, doing abortions for these women where they are. They shouldn't have to go to Safdarjung Hospital and spend 3 days there. We need to tell women that you can have a medical abortion and go back to work the same day or the next day. It's no different from working when you have your menstrual period. We need to tell women that this is probably more cost effective for you because the medical system is going to exploit you. And I'm sorry to say the private practitioners are going to do that because these women are desperate and it doesn't matter whether they can afford it or they can't. They're still going to be exploited the same way and they'll dig out that money from somewhere and completely destroy their finances. We need to tell them that you've got to stop asking and making feel bad about genders of previous children because every case we spoke about here was the first trimester termination where that history was irrelevant. Maybe what she felt was, I've got 2 girls, and a lot of times, I once had a patient of mine who was from the big industrialist family, and she says, you know what, I've got 2 girls, and I don't want a 3rd child, because, and I don't want my family to know I'm doing this because if I have a boy, then my girls won't be treated well. That was her choice and her decision, and you have to respect it. I have highly educated women with highly educated husbands who say, he will never support me and understand. And that's where we've got to support them. The law allows us to do it. And we had a policy which says confidentiality even from the husband if she so desires. We don't want to hide it from the husband. But if she wants to hide it from him, I am very willing to hide it from him. So I think we have a lot of work to do internally, ourselves, practitioners, organizations, but we need lots and lots of women, lots of practitioners in those bastis, giving out medication abortions, which the amendments may be able to allow women to get, so they don't even have to go away from home to get this. And it's the most secret and confidential thing in the world. The first thing I'll do when I give a woman a medication abortion is, you know what, nobody needs to know. An abortion is an abortion. Whether nature starts it or medication starts it, you cannot differentiate. There is no blood test which can ever tell someone you had an induced abortion. This is what we need to start giving out messages with. So these women will never have a problem wherever they go, whoever they go with. So I really feel great session, lots of thoughts coming in my mind and a lot of work to do. Going to courts, you know, I'm sorry, but my opinion, I really respect our courts. But you shouldn't go to court because very often you don't know what the verdict is going to be, unless you're really, really sure what they're going to judge and tell you. It's Russian roulette. So let me tell you about the first time someone went to court. I can confidently say here with a clean heart that I have terminated any number of abnormal pregnancies since I started obstetrics in 1985 as a resident, as a consultant, in my private practice, because I believe that this child is either not going to survive. I won't do it for a cleft lip, and I won't do it for an extra digit. This child is not going to survive or is going to require major medical intervention to survive. According to me, this is not an MTP. This should not come under the MTP Act. Asking the court to allow me to do it under the MTP Act is putting a square peg in a round hole. The court says, Parliament said 20 weeks, why? In fact, the court should say, why are you coming at 25 weeks? At 25 weeks, it's an induction of labor for an obstetric indication by an obstetrician for his obstetric patient. And that should be something that should, I want the judges to tell doctors, just go back and do your job and look after these women and stop harassing us and stop putting women through it. Let's face it, people sometimes go to court so that they have the day in the sun and they get the headlines.
You think even women who are going, or you think lawyers?
I'm going to ask Anuba to tell me how much she thinks is the woman going and how much is the provider looking after the woman, convincing her to go. A woman, Nikita Mehta, had a spontaneous abortion. I don't know if you got the drift of what I said. Yes. She had a spontaneous abortion after the court denied her. So women would rather get, which woman wants to go and parade herself before the world? But the provider says, this is the only way I can do it. You have no choice, so you'll have to come with me to court.
So obviously the
So
providers
that's
are
what.
also
The second
giving...
group is that young girl. What have you put her through? Look at the WHO statistics. See what the chances, what maternal mortality. Firstly, let me get one thing right. Whether we like it or not, every pregnancy is a grave risk to a woman's life. Maternal mortality in India, with all the advances, is still 150, 140 per 100,000. The risk of having an abortion is far less than any pregnancy. So when you do an abortion, you're already saving so many women. Here is this young child. You are putting her through the rest of her pregnancy. The outcome finally is going to be surgical. Maybe if you did it early, maybe you might get away with medical, maybe not. You are putting this after everyone knows and she knows she's pregnant. You're telling her, I'm sorry, but you now need to go through the next 3.5 months and deliver your baby. So that, I think we've gotten it all wrong. I don't know whether we can turn back the clock. The reason why we wrote that last minute amendment, which was not a part of the original amendments, was now the genie is out of the bottle, the Pandora's box has been opened, now we have to solve it legally. But we should have never gone to court, and trust me when I say there are a lot of doctors out there who are still terminating pregnancies the way they should be terminating. Let me tell you something about MTPs. You want to talk about legalities? Again, Anubhav can correct me if I'm wrong. Nowhere in the MTP Act do you say the word abortion. You said pregnancy is terminated before 20 weeks. After 20 weeks, I can only terminate a pregnancy to save a woman's life. In a 28-week woman, where the fetus is not growing, and I do a cesarean, technically, I am breaking the MTP law if you're going strictly by the MTP law, because I'm terminating a pregnancy when her life is not at risk. Every time I do a cesarean before she goes into labor, I'm doing that. That's common sense. That's obstetrics. That's medicine. That's my job. That's my oath. And somewhere along the way, we've gotten all muddled up. Now we need Anubha to solve this mess for us, because now we need the courts to either make it easy for women. We need the government to pass that amendment so women get all that support and that help of 24 weeks and any time in pregnancy. Or we just need doctors to do their job with quietly and without going to court. Sorry.
So okay, Anjali.
Sorry, I know this is for the journalists, but this is for Vaishali and Abantika, and maybe Anubha, even you. Why is it that the women's groups have not raised this issue?
I was reading this thing that you put together where you say that powerful journalism has always explored intersectionality, and the intersections that you mention here are SRHR intersects with many issues of rights, autonomy, gender, healthcare, policy, and law. I think it's also intensely political. When you bring up generations of women saying the ultimate achievement in your life is motherhood, what do you expect? You've brought up women, men, everybody to say that all you need to do in life is to produce a baby. So I think women's groups, actually I don't think women in India have really fought for anything. We got voting rights on a platter. So maybe abortion is going to be what we'll fight for.
Thank you.
You got your sanitary napkins.
Okay, I'm just going to open.
I have something to say about sanitary napkins as well. 5% GST gone. Sanitary napkins are not available outside of big cities. GST or no GST, they're not available. There's no sanitary napkin outside of big cities because nobody uses them.
And my accountant doesn't think they'll be cheaper. They are going to be cheaper.
Yeah.
They are going to be cheaper.
Vaishali, would you like to add something, or we'll open up the floor?
Just a little point that most of the stories that happen on abortion and these issues, MTP acts, etc., only come up either when there's a court case or there's been an act of violence against a child, and that becomes a big news story where everyone wants to invest their time, and unfortunately it also makes for good copy. What we don't do enough of is do stories simply on educating people about their rights and about what happens when you undergo an abortion, what are the options available for you. And we don't hear enough about women, young sexually active women, or young married women, or young old married women, who want to have an abortion because they're not ready to have a child at that moment in their lives. We don't hear about them. We only hear about court cases, we hear about congenital abnormalities, and we hear about acts of sexual violence. I think we need to have this conversation amongst all of us and as journalists, where we are talking about abortion as a rights issue, and we don't do enough of that, and that's something we're trying to rectify in our own little way, where we're trying to give information as simply as we can and as much as we can. So in the last, I think about 8 or 9 months, I think we've done about 6-7 stories around the subject. And we've also had a lot of young women write to us about their experiences of going to doctors, and the comment that you made, a lot of judgment, a lot of whatever, but also about exercising their right to have an abortion.
Very recently, I had met with a very senior journalist friend of mine who used to be an editor, at a business channel, and who sees herself as a feminist and someone who's bringing up her daughters with extreme pride and grace. She was surprised when I said that abortion is legal. She didn't know that. And this is a well-informed journalist who has not had time to invest in health, but is well-read, educated, and perhaps that indicates the need for workshops and the need for the media to write so much more about this issue, because well-read people also are not very clear about the policy in the country. So on that note, I just want to open it up, and if there are questions, yes, Menika.
I feel that the same, I mean, I'm going back to the same thing about doctors and their opinions and how probably they are shaped the same way as the rest of society. But I also felt that like something like a Chandigarh case that happened, and it was the health rights activists who came out and spoke about it. No organization like Foxy or IMA or anyone, nobody said anything. And like, I mean, in that Chandigarh PGI doctor, that opinion itself was blasphemous in my opinion. But I mean, no commercial doctor body said anything. So I mean, and nobody is saying anything about people denying second trimester abortion, because I agree that the system is not perfect and they can be victimized in many ways. But as an ethical duty, I suppose there needs to be a discussion about it, perhaps, instead of just denying. These are legal abortions, but they're just denied often enough. So is there something that we need to think about? I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that?
Dr. Sheriar, would you like to take that?
So you're absolutely right. Foxy has this most amazing rights to abortion charter, but I don't think most Foxy members even know about it. It's so sad. And it just says everything that needs to be said. And we wrote this in 15 years ago. Professional organizations have people, and they're different people who are there at different times. And someone mentioned political, and sometimes there are different agendas. It's again unfortunate that our organization championed mid-level providers for a long time. When there was a perceived social media backlash, which the media covered very vocally, which was driven by IMA, we took back a belief that we had held for 6 or 7 years, which I believe was ethical and I thought was shameful. So, well, professional organizations live in society and they probably have people. They also believe that they can't be responding to everything, which is unfortunate. They should, and but they all have. If you really go to the Foxy website and read the policy statements that exist, they are great. If you look at the right to safe abortions, it is great. But then again, our members will do exactly what they will do, and it's really sad. I am still convinced that a majority of obstetricians in this country do abortions without thinking about it. One reason why abortion happened in India is people didn't think too much about it one way or the other. At that point, society didn't think too much about it. Doctors just did it as a kind of a task or a responsibility. There's a very small number of doctors who say we won't do abortions. Most doctors will. Yes, they may have problems with doing some abortions because suddenly they feel very offended, and that has to change and that has to be challenged. But I completely agree with you. People have to come out more. Everyone has to come out more when these things happen.
I have a quick question, if I can take the liberty of asking Anubha Rastogi, who's been so patient and quiet through these discussions. Anubha, the Supreme Court case that Anjali was referring to last week. So we've seen the right to privacy judgment last year in August, and we've seen this case. Is there a contradiction? Because many say that what the Supreme Court judge right now cited, he was just doing a very black and white reading of the MTP Act. So he's perfectly right in denying that woman abortion at 25 weeks. Of course, there can be a separate conversation about the language that was used, but were we wrong to feel elated about the right to privacy judgment?
Okay, so two things here. As far as the Supreme Court judgment that came last week is concerned, so what was reported was what the judges said in open court, I believe, but that was not what was part of the order that finally came. The order is a single page order which only says that it's been dismissed, and which is, I mean, it's the Supreme Court, there's no one above them, so they can afford to say dismissed and, close it at that. They're not bound to give reasons.
So while a judge is, and it's absolutely wrong. I mean, you may have whatever your own thought processes, your biases, but you're sitting in a chair, and and there are responsibilities that come from that, and you have to go by law, whether you agree with it or not. So while saying all of those things, yes, that's absolutely wrong. The second thing I definitely want to say is that the right to privacy judgment, yes, absolutely fabulous, great, everything. All of that was said about a woman's autonomy, all of that is the obiter. That's the observation in the judgment. The real meat of the judgment came in the end, where they actually gave directions, where they did not give any directions on this aspect. So while you've used page after page and said beautiful things, great language, I felt so good reading all of that. But when I came to the end of the judgment, where is it? Where is that direction saying, okay, so, so we direct Union of India to just say this much, that we direct Union of India to take steps to ensure that women have access to sexual and reproductive rights that we have just held, they are entitled to. Where is that? In the absence of that direction, all of this is just beautiful language. And how is one, like I had doctors, and activists ask me after this judgment came and it was reported, so should we just start doing abortions now? So can we now no problem? I said, how? How are you going to do that? Because while there is a judgment, there needs to be a direction. There needs to be either a change in law or some policy or something. In the absence of that,
Talking about direction, wasn't there a directive from the Supreme Court last year which said that there should be state medical boards across India?
again, that was an observation. It's not part of the order. That's what they discussed in court. And they asked, the Union of India Council that why don't you? But it's not part of the order.
So it is not binding on the center to go ahead.
And frankly, do we really want that another additional tier somewhere? Already we know that there aren't enough hospitals, there aren't enough qualified doctors, there aren't enough registered places, and now we're asking for state level committees which don't exist in law to be formed for some reason. It's just going to add.
I think Abantika has a point too.
To that judgment to the states, asking for the medical boards. So then that means is that binding now? It's not. I mean,
No,
the government
so
of India, I think, is not
from
binding anyway.
There's no direction from the court.
Right.
The judge, while hearing because what happened in the last 1.5 years, of course, counting the one that came last week, the Supreme Court heard 22 cases on this. They were almost hearing a case every week. I mean, I think they work only for 22 weeks or something. So, don't quote me on that. So, so when they're hearing these cases every week, they're finally like, why are we doing this every week? Please, why can't somebody else do this? So in one of those judgments, the Supreme Court has said, don't come to us, go to the High Courts. And in one of the conversations, they have said that, well, why don't you just set up these committees that we set up after a case comes to us so that they can just directly go to each other. But it's not a direction. So while the government may or may not have written, I've also heard this, I've not really seen it, may have written to the state, but that's of their own volition. They're free to do that.
And anyways, health is a state subject, so
absolutely,
government of India can write whatever.
So, I actually am a little confused myself now. I think one of the easiest things, given the kind of technologies we have, even if we take something like fetal abnormalities, it is so easy, as Nozer said, to either the center or the state governments just put it out in the Gazette to say this is the list of fetal abnormalities, and the ministry already has that list, very comprehensive list, that any of these, just go ahead. I mean, that's one. Would that be an option? The second thing is the amendments are, as we all know, languishing. So what is the process for that now?
As far as the list is concerned, the list can only become operational after the law is amended. Because as of now, the law says 20 weeks. So if you want to take it beyond 20 weeks, you need to amend the law which says beyond 20 weeks, and then you need to go and make a gazetted list or go in the rules. The rules are the ones which give meat on the bone. The law just gets amended and tells you where and what you are, which is why we now because of the situation we are in, we forced ourselves to now need this amendment, so at least that one big problem just goes away forever. As far as the boards are concerned, I do not see how a board under the present law can have the right of recommending an abortion after 20 weeks. Because the only reason why it can be done on medical grounds is the woman's life is at risk. So I think a court can make that decision. But how can a medical board say it's okay? I wish they could. First of all, boards are not a good thing for women. I'm sorry to say that, because you're adding, as was rightly said, another layer, delays. How often do they meet? Do they meet once a week? Do they meet once a month? Pregnancies don't wait for board meetings. They keep progressing. And finally, please remember that today terminating a pregnancy at 20 weeks, 24 weeks, 28 weeks, thanks to the medications we have available, is extremely safe and probably safer than having a normal childbirth.
There was a question here which I'd like to take.
So, just till that question's asked, and just to also answer what you asked, Anjali, I think as far as the amendments are concerned, from what I understood, I have looked at the 21 judgments that came out from the Supreme Court and about 53 that came from the High Courts, different High Courts. So in a lot of these petitions, this was asked, and in fact in one of them, a judgment from the Bombay High Court has even cited the fact that the amendments were already in the public domain, and in the amendments that were proposed, a situation that was before them would have actually never reached court, so we will go ahead and permit it. So there is that. But there's also the other side where you have Union of India councils in court who are scared to say anything, because the only instructions that they have been given is that the reason why the amendments are not moving, because our concern now is Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. And so we are not going to do anything that will look like we are promoting lesser girls being born. So this whole conflation that we keep trying to keep aside between the PCP and DT, between the MTP, between sex selection and access to abortion services, it's very much there in the government. It's very much there in the understanding of the people who are making these norms, who are deciding whether these amendments should take priority or not. And that is again, I think, where work needs to be done. Yeah. And the other thing that I do definitely want to point out here is in that, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, all of the 21 cases, they did not decide the legal issue. You went to court, they set up a board, the board gave medical advice. On the basis of that medical advice, they said yes or no. But if that's what I wanted to do, I would have gone to the hospital. I have come to you because there is a legal issue involved. Please decide it either way, this way or that. I mean, that's risky, but at least decide it so one knows. And you've done this before. For example, in Vishakha, you've done it, where there was no law on sexual harassment. You said that we have the power to bridge the gap. Till the time, till there is a legislative vacuum, we can legislate. So why are you not doing that here? Why did you send each case back on its merits, either saying yes or no and not decide it once and for all? That's also a concern here. Question?
Yeah. So what you just spoke, I'll just take off from there. Clearly, and what we understand from the ministry, the amendments are not going through anytime soon. How then, Dr. Nozer, can doctors, creatively interpret the law? And because these amendments, they're not going to come. I mean, one has asked this question several times. So, in that situation, what is it that Foxy can do, or just generally doctors can do? That is one. And the second thing I wanted to say, we heard all these women, and quite, revealing and interesting to know what happens on the ground. And in your presentation, Vinod, you said that you showed that, graphic of how women reach A hospital. So the first point of contact really is where, in my own conversations with women, is where it's all going wrong. Whether it is someone the maid who works in my house, or it is someone like me. So how can that first point of contact, because a lot of women I've spoken to don't have these women they know they can go to and get advice. So they'll go to some quack, they'll go to somebody, like my maid showed me this prescription, she said the doctor wrote this dawa, and then she went and she took something and then she felt really ill. So what's going wrong? Where is this first point of contact issue, and how can we address it?
So I think the amendment on late abortions is low-hanging fruit, and I believe at some point that will go through, because the providers want it. It's an influential lobby. It's not difficult, but honestly that was never really the real important thing in the amendments, because it's looking after the women with that particular problem who I believe were being looked after anyway. And I must say, in my personal capacity, I will continue looking after them. The challenge comes in when it comes to the others, and I think it was mentioned earlier about stories and headlines and abnormal pregnancies and rapes. What could have been a bigger story than 15.6 million abortions a year? What could have been a bigger story than saying, how is it that from 1971 to 2018 you didn't know how many abortions were happening in the country? And well, the government has obviously questioned the statistics, because saying that, there were samples which were then projected to the country. You couldn't have a larger sample and more scientific study. All statistics in this country are samples, smaller samples, and projected to the country. I think we missed a great opportunity. We've not missed it as yet because it's still 2018. Please do something before it becomes 2019 and the study becomes dated. Read the study, go through the study. There will be a lot of questions. The 73% outside sites, they are not women doing themselves. Most of them are doctors like me prescribing them outside medical facilities and institutions from our clinics. So it's many different things. It just tells you abortions have moved out of clinics. WHO said a safe abortion is one that is done by a trained provider in a safe clinic. No more. A safe abortion is done by a knowledgeable person prescribing the right dose of medication to the right patient. That is where we probably need to demand from the government access for women. And to answer their question about it affecting the sex ratio, I think someone was going to mention Ayush there. It can't affect the sex ratio because the government can say, we will allow them termination only up to 8 or 9 weeks. That's where medication abortion works up till. They were prescribing this anyway. We know that. We know that in Mumbai, when the Maharashtra government cracked down, they acted against a number of Ayush doctors in the slums because the only doctors in the slums were Ayush doctors. And that's why women have to go to Safdarjung hospital. And they can't go to doctors in their jaggies because they are the Ayush doctors who will access them. Okay, if the government wants to be careful, do it for Ayush doctors in the public sector, because your primary health centers and CHCs are being managed by nurses and Ayush doctors. Don't make that woman travel and spend money to go somewhere else to get what she wants. So I think they will happen. I'm worried they will happen piecemeal. And I'm really concerned that when you talk about Beti Bachao, every woman who has an abortion and an unsafe abortion is a Beti. They're all women. We need to look after them and care for them. And I feel we've been too secretive about this for too long. It's time we started shouting and screaming and telling them there's just too many of them. And women have to realize, every woman who has an abortion thinks she's alone. And she's ashamed. And she doesn't need to be. That was told to us earlier. A majority of women who have an abortion give it enough thought, and when they finish, they are relieved. Some of them may feel, the ones who feel bad are the ones who have to abort a wanted pregnancy like an abnormal pregnancy. Most women who make a decision, it's a heart-wrenching decision. She's doing it for her family, she's doing it for her husband, she's doing it because she's not married. She's not going to feel guilt, she's relieved. And if the provider is smart and the provider can make them feel good and better, and I will make women of different religions feel better by telling them how every religion allows abortion in spite of what the religious leaders say so, and I will tell them how they are not alone. And now I tell my women that in India, 15 million women do it. And she immediately says, you mean it's that common, doctor? I don't feel so bad now. And I think we need to start doing that for women. And for that, you need to start. I keep saying that number loudly all the time, every time I meet women. And I think you all need to keep saying that number all the time.
The second question that was to Mr. Manning about the point of contact. How do we improve that? The first point of contact.
One is, every time somebody tells me amendment is not going to happen, it's extremely disappointing to hear, but probably you're right. Unfortunately. So, given abortions, if you need to make a change, big change, you need to do something very dramatic. The amendment was dramatic about mid-level providers. Now, assuming that's not possible, what is the next possible dramatic solution? It's about the first point contact. Where are most of our women going? They're going and accessing abortion, not in the facility. So is it possible then that two things get done? For those number of women, which we don't know the numbers, who are accessing over the counter, can we provide them good enough information? Right? And secondly, X percentage of them, again undetermined, after taking it even in the right doses, will need a referral. At least make sure that they know where to go for referrals, and make sure when they go there, they get it. And the substitution kind of thing doesn't happen. If we do that, we may address the issue of point of contact, and that may be the logical thing to do, but it has got various legal issues. But I don't see, if that doesn't happen, if one of these two happen or if both don't happen, there won't be a dramatic difference.
There's one more question from the Quint.
Yeah, hi. Dr. Sheriar, I would want to ask you, since we were talking about amending the law, right? So when we talk about it, there's already an amendment bill which talks about increasing the limit to 24 weeks. But is that good enough? Because when we do that, when we talk about amendments, I'm sure the first thing they'll do is to, hey, we've done 24 weeks, it's great, now we've done a great job. So is that good enough?
So I had the fortunate or unfortunate privilege of being a part of the 2002-2003 amendments and the 2006-2010. And amendments, I realize when you're sitting at the table, are about give and take. What you can get and what you probably need to give up. The 24-week, when we first started as a group, let me say here, we were looking at the women's perspective, we were looking at rights, we were looking at defining abortions in the MTP Act, we were talking about mid-level providers. At some point, the NCW came in and said, we'd like to look at vulnerable women and we want to 28 weeks. So we met with the NCW and said, 28 weeks, you're going to land up with a 1 kilo baby, which is alive and crying. This woman doesn't want it. Who in the health system is going to look after that 1 kilo baby and do the NICU care? So we brought it down to 24 weeks. It is not an extension to 24 weeks. It's a conditional extension. That's not mentioned in the amendments, but this was the purpose of extending 20 to 24 weeks for rape survivors and for women in vulnerable situations. So that's just these amendments were never meant to be seen piecemeal. Then happened Nikita Mehta's case. So suddenly we were back at the table in the ministry one day, another meeting. Now what do we do about this? Okay, let's write another amendment to get the late abortions in. And then once we were the POXO Act is creating a problem. So now what do we do about that? Let's put a secrecy clause into the amendments, and they developed. But like Vinod rightly says, what women really need is access, affordable, available, close to where they are. And the only way you can do that is lots and lots of other providers. India is uniquely privileged. It's really unfortunate, and I must say this saddens me when one part of medicine considers all other parts of medicine as something inferior. They are doctors. They are educated. We looked at some of their curricula. They do the same OBGYN curricula that we do. At least we know for sure that in Ayurveda and homeopathy, they even have a post-graduation in obstetrics and gynecology. I was surprised to find that there are some Ayurvedic doctors who do surgeries. right? So we have to give them the respect. Mid-level providers have been shown to work. I've been to Bangladesh many years ago, 20 years ago, and seen the mid-levels doing the most brilliant surgical abortions. They will outclass many doctors in India in the way they did it. South Africa showed it can be done. Scandinavia shown it can be done. You have to understand what medical abortion is today. Take one tablet, take the second tablet after 48 hours. As long as you've diagnosed the pregnancy, you can't go wrong. You're going to be successful 92% of the time. The fear is what happens if there is an incomplete abortion? 10% of every pregnancy that happens naturally lands up with an abortion. Doesn't the medical system look after those women? These women are no different. If a woman in a village has a spontaneous abortion, she gets it taken care of. If a woman in a village has an induced abortion, she just has to be told, this is no different from a spontaneous abortion. You have to follow the same channels and get the same care. The next big fear is, there'll be a whole bunch of ectopic pregnancies that we will miss. Don't ectopic pregnancies happen in nature? In fact, here, if I give her the medication and she does not bleed, I'll say, you know what, if you don't bleed within 24 hours of the second tablet, please get an ultrasound done, you might have an ectopic pregnancy. I'll actually do something which is safer for her. But we need to set this right. A lot of these biases, we told stories about how women came and died, but what's happening in the country is something completely different. With 12.5 million medication abortions, where are all those women flooding our wards, bleeding, landing up with blood transfusion and dying? It's not happening at all. So this is sometimes a discourse to give it a bad name and say, as long as I do it right. It's the same one tablet followed by 4 tablets after 48 hours. But if a trained nurse does it, 1 tablet followed by 4 tablets after 48 hours, she would never have the judgment of knowing when to use it. When all she needs to know is this woman 7 weeks pregnant? There's hardly any complications or side effects or contraindications to this medication. I think we need to start this whole process and not give up. And at the end of it, we were told in a meeting by the Joint Secretary, Additional Secretary, when all this happened, please tell me who's going to look after my women at the grassroots level. Give me a solution. Because who's there at the grassroots level? That doctor or that nurse. Our MBBS doctors at the moment aren't there. So I think and if the government wants to feel safe, allow it in the public sector. Don't go private just as yet. Watch what happens for 2 or 3 years and then go to the private sector. You can always pass a law. Didn't you have a law which says cesareans by MBBS doctors trained by Foxy, only if they are working in the public sector, they can't do it outside. Do it for your women in the public sector, but do something.
Dr. Sheriar, just very quickly, there are concerns about the MTP amendments, and it has been reported by a lot of journalists. The concerns within the government are that it will have an impact on sex selection and the conflation between PCP and DT, which you spoke about. Do you think those fears are misplaced or justified?
You know why I think they are misplaced? I don't think the guy is doing what they are doing at the moment, which I think is... let me really get out there. If I lived in Scandinavia and a woman was fair and just and valued both genders equally, I see nothing wrong with sex selection. If a woman can decide how many children I want, whether I want children, she can decide, but she has to be fair. This country is not fair when it comes to selection, so this country is discrimination and we can't allow it to happen. Now the excuses I have learned. If you increase the provider base, more sex selection. Do you know that in 2002, we took away the right of doing second trimester abortions from MBBS doctors? A second trimester abortion can only be done by a gynecologist. Even an MBBS doctor can't do a second trimester abortion. What are sex-selected abortions? As of now, they are all second trimester abortions. So that is just an excuse which is used to block mid-levels because they will never be able to do it. When it comes to the other thing, you think someone really is going to wait till 24 weeks? This woman, unfortunately, if she decides to go that way, is going to find a criminal provider to do it for her who may or may not be qualified, and she has been doing it in spite of the law. She doesn't need the law to do it. Who needs the law is that woman who's been raped. Who needs the law is the woman who has a major birth defect. Who needs the law is a doctor who wants to be saved. These are the guys who need the law. So I just do not accept that people are waiting and the numbers are going to go up if this happens. They can't, because you haven't been able to. It's happening outside the system. Look at the law, change your strategy, see what will work. Don't just go on fiddling around with this, but this is not going to be your problem.
Vaishali, one question to you. Do you think the media has really done its job in, putting these clarifications out on where the confusions are, why the fears or suspicions are misplaced, and why the policymakers need to listen to this side of the argument? Have we put these arguments out cogently enough?
Well, I think these arguments have been put out, and I think they've been put out several times whenever these big news items break. The problem is that you forget about it after that, and there's not enough repetition, and there's not enough conversation on an ongoing basis. The media also has a very complicated job to do, where there's so many issues in this country that you want to report on, so many issues on health that you want to report on. So maybe perhaps this sort of falls in the sidelines unless there is a big breaking news story that brings it back to forefront. So can we do better? Yes. But to say the media has not done it would be a little unfair to health journalists, all of them out here, who've done a great job reporting this.
Any questions from the journalists? If not, then we'll wrap it up. I know we've overshot the time anyway. I wanted to just invite Roshina from the Quint, who had written a fabulous piece after the Sony ad came that Anjali spoke about some time ago. Roshina, a few words from you on what really, triggered that piece, and what inspired you to really take that line where you link women's right to this issue.
So, to be honest, I feel a little out of place right now because so many experts have already spoken, so I'm unsure what's new that I could add to it. But what I've learned in my little experience is when you talk about sensitive reporting and when you talk about an issue like abortion, I think the premise is that there are millions of women in the country and all over the world who are undergoing it. Yet there are no two cases which are the same. It's such a personal and individual experience. So how do you talk about it? How do you address it in a way that you're not creating binaries, you're not creating black and white categories, you're not being generic? Yet at the same time, when people come to you, they see your work, they read your stories, they know that they are not alone, that support is available, that help is available. And it's a very natural, normal medical procedure to undergo. So in that situation, the terminology becomes extremely important. So this is something that we also do at the Quint. We never put out a story on, say, abortion or for any other health concern for that matter without having an expert on board. It's extremely important to sort of remember that as journalists, it's not our job to be therapists, to be counselors. Our job is to only do an objective reporting of facts. So why not get a health expert involved, a doctor involved, and let them take care of that aspect of your story. So even though this ad that you mentioned, this Sony ad, which has already been spoken about in this workshop, so what they did was they created a very clear binary where they pitted a woman between playing God, that is going ahead with the abortion, or to save motherhood. And I'm quoting verbatim, that is to not go ahead with the abortion. Several problems with this. One, that it's such a personal issue. You cannot bring it out in a public space and discuss it using empty rhetoric, bombastic words. And the problem with this is that you're taking away from the conversation, which needs to be enriched, encouraged. And I say this from experience. Now, any time at QuintFit, we've put out a story on, say, reproductive health or issues like abortion, it's received massive engagement, which just goes on to show that people want that conversation. So that was one problem with the story. And I hope that as long as we pay attention to terminology and sensitive reporting, it should hopefully lead us to that space, to that idealistic space, where conversation around abortion is no longer a taboo. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshina. So we wanted to just include a reporter's perspective on this. Yes, Menika.
One comment. I think we should never use the word female feticide. That's
and,
Yeah.
and talk to
We
the
should say sex-selective abortions when we talk of PCP NDT. That we should never use the word feticide. Uh, I think feticide basically is stigmatizing. So I've been very careful about it, and I've been telling everyone just FYI.
Thank
In
you.
fact, in the brochures that all the journalists have received today, there's a media toolkit that's been prepared, which has been put together with the advice and counsel of experts from both media. So senior journalists have advised, and of course, it's according to international norms. So, and that point completely figures in there on feticide. So please go through it and see if we can try and make reporting on this more sensitive.
And the best article written by the most sensitive journalist then goes to another department for a picture. And that picture sometimes makes me cringe. The pictures and the graphics that they put with an article on abortion. And I think we need a lot of work there. That picture from Time Life it's like it touched your heart. But most of the time those pictures really, so I think we also need to not just work with journalists who will give a great story, but unfortunately it goes to another department who is supposed to make the page look good, and they go to a stock photograph batch of their abortion photos. And then I say, my God, what a great article, but look at that picture.
So that's something that happens with us all the time. We contribute regularly in different publications through, our experts do it. Sometimes we send the articles out. And while it's a fabulously written piece, the image that's put next to it, especially if it's a piece on abortion and reproductive rights, completely wrong messaging. So it would be worthwhile if you'd like to share some of the, some of what we put in the media toolkit with other departments, those who are looking at graphics, especially online. So that might be worth a read. So thank you on this note. I just want to thank everyone for coming, all the journalists, and hopefully we'll all be able to work on this issue better in the future. Thank you so much.